The snow fell on Detroit like ash from a dying fire. Christmas Eve 2024. In what used to be the industrial heart of America, now nothing but frozen ruins and broken promises, General Nathaniel Hawke counted his breaths through cracked ribs. 14 days. 14 days since Viktor Draganov's Revolutionary Brigade had taken him. 14 days of questions he couldn't answer, names he wouldn't give, secrets that would die with him. The basement cell measured 10 feet by 8. Concrete walls wept with moisture that froze before it reached the floor. A single bulb burned overhead, never turning off, never letting him find peace in darkness. They'd taken his uniform on day one. Now he wore prison grays that reeked of diesel fuel and fear from whoever wore them last. Hawke was 62 years old, 38 years in uniform, 3 wars, 5 continents, more classified operations than he could count. But none of that mattered now. Here he was, just meat waiting to break. The door opened with its familiar screech. 4 men entered, same as always. But today, walking behind them, came someone new. Alexei Kozlov, former Spetsnaz, the best interrogator the Soviet Union ever produced before it collapsed and spat him out into the private market. "General Hawke," Kozlov said, his English perfect, cultured. "You know why I'm here." Hawke said nothing. His left eye was swollen shut. 3 ribs definitely broken. Possible internal bleeding. But his mind remained sharp. That was the cruelest irony. His body was failing, but his mind refused to follow. "Let's discuss what you've really been protecting." Kozlov continued, pulling up a metal stool. The legs scraped against concrete, a sound like fingernails on stone. Not just military positions or supply routes, something far more valuable. Operation Phantom. The words hung in the air like frozen breath. Hawke kept his expression neutral, but inside his pulse quickened. How did Kozlov know the name? 12 names, Kozlov said, lighting a cigarette. The smoke curled up blue-gray in the harsh light. 12 ghosts who don't officially exist. Soldiers declared killed in action who continue to serve in shadows. Your private army of the dead general. America's last line of defense against threats the government can't acknowledge. Operation Phantom was real. Hawke had built it himself after Afghanistan, when he realized conventional warfare was dying and something else was being born. 12 operatives, each with unique skills, each officially deceased, each willing to sacrifice everything for their country. They operated without oversight, without recognition, without existence. Perfect weapons in an imperfect world. "There is no Operation Phantom," Hawke said, his voice rough from screaming he couldn't remember. Kozlov smiled. "General, we both know that's not true. Just as we both know one of your ghosts is listening to this conversation right now. Aren't you Scarlett? 500 miles away in a cabin buried in Montana wilderness?" Scarlett Thorne set down her coffee cup. The military radio she shouldn't have kept crackled with Kozlov's words. She'd been listening for 3 hours ever since she'd picked up the emergency frequency by accident. Or maybe not by accident. Maybe some part of her had been waiting for this moment for 5 years. Scarlett had been 23 when she died. Officially, January 2019. Classified operation in Eastern Europe. A Serbian warlord with chemical weapons. One shot from 400 meters in a blizzard. The kind of shot that should have been impossible. But Scarlett didn't deal in impossible. She dealt in necessity. The operation succeeded. The warlord died, but someone leaked her position to his men. They hunted her across 2 countries. She lost her spotter, Corporal James Mitchell, to a landmine. Lost her support team to an ambush. Lost everything except the rifle. When she finally made it back, barely alive, frostbitten, half dead from blood loss, she found out why. General Bradford Steele, Deputy Director of Special Operations, had sold her position to the Russians for $2 million and a promise of more intelligence to come. The evidence was circumstantial but damning. Encrypted communications from his personal device, wire transfers to offshore accounts, meetings with known Russian assets, but they couldn't prove it definitively, couldn't risk the scandal. The military's reputation was already fragile after recent failures, so they offered her a choice: die officially and disappear, or die for real when Steele arranged another accident. She chose the first option. They gave her a funeral with military honors, folded flag, 21-gun salute. Her mother, Elizabeth Thorne, cried over an empty casket, while Scarlett watched from a distance through a scope 800 meters away, unable to comfort her, unable to explain. But there had been one person who'd believed her, one person who'd helped her vanish properly instead of just disappearing into a shallow grave. Nathaniel Hawke, then a colonel, had signed her death certificate with his left hand, while his right hand slipped her new identity documents and a bank account number. "You don't owe me anything," he'd said in that quiet office at Fort Bragg, rain hammering the windows. "But someday someone else might need what you can do. Someone innocent, someone worth saving. When that day comes, I hope you'll remember that not everyone in uniform forgot what honor means." "Why help me?" she'd asked. "Because I've seen too many good soldiers thrown away for politics. And because Operation Phantom needs people like you, the dead who refuse to stop fighting." That was 5 years ago. She'd been hiding ever since. Montana in winter, where the isolation matched her mood. Arizona in summer, where the heat reminded her she was still alive. Always moving, always watching, always ready. The rifle sat in its case beside her chair. Not just any rifle. An M110 semi-automatic sniper system, 7.62 NATO effective range, 800 meters in normal hands. In her hands, she'd pushed it past 1,600 meters with the right conditions. But this one was special. The entire weapon had been gold-plated as a joke by her unit after she'd made an impossible shot in Syria, taking out 3 targets with 3 bullets in 4 seconds. They'd called her the Golden Ghost after that. The ghost part stuck. The rifle stayed gold. On the radio, Kozlov's voice continued. "You see, General, I trained your precious Scarlett. 2015, the NATO-Russian cooperation program, back when our governments pretended peace was possible." Scarlett's blood chilled. Those 3 months in Moscow, she'd been young, eager, selected for an elite exchange program. Kozlov had been her instructor. He'd taught her things American trainers didn't know or wouldn't teach. How to control her breathing in ways that slowed her heartbeat to 40 beats per minute. How to read wind patterns in urban environments by watching smoke birds, even the way clothes dried on lines. How to calculate bullet drop with instinctive precision, making adjustments in fractions of seconds. He'd also learned everything about her patterns, her preferences, the way she held her breath for exactly 3 seconds before squeezing the trigger. The way she always set up her position slightly to the left of optimal to account for right eye dominance. The way she tapped her trigger finger twice before taking the shot, a nervous habit she couldn't break. Small things. Fatal things if someone knew to look for them. "She's good," Kozlov said on the radio, speaking as if lecturing students. "Possibly the best natural shooter I've ever trained. But she has weaknesses, emotional attachments, a sense of duty that overrides self-preservation. She'll come for you, General. Not because it's smart, because it's right." "She's dead," Hawke said on the radio. "Killed in action 2019, Belgrade." "No," Kozlov replied. "She's listening to this right now, probably from Montana. That cabin she bought under the name Sarah Morrison, 20 acres of isolation, solar panels for power, satellite internet she thinks is secure. Hello, Scarlett. I know you can hear me." Scarlett stood up fast enough to knock over her coffee. The brown liquid spread across the wooden floor, but she didn't notice. How did he know? How could he possibly know? "Would you like to know how I found you?" Kozlov continued as if reading her mind across 500 miles. "The rifle. That golden rifle. You had it serviced at a gun shop in Billings 6 months ago. The owner, nice man named Carl, took a photo, posted it online. Look at this crazy custom job, he wrote. It went viral in certain circles. Circles I monitor. Circles where people understand that a gold-plated M110 is unique as a fingerprint. Stupid, careless. The rifle's feed mechanism had been jamming, a problem with the gas system she couldn't fix with field tools. She'd driven 3 hours to Billings, chosen a shop at random, paid cash. Carl had been professional, discreet, but she hadn't counted on social media. Haven't counted on an old man's excitement about unusual weapons. Hadn't counted on Kozlov's network being that extensive. So here's my proposition, Scarlett, Kozlov said. General Hawk dies tomorrow morning, 6 a.m. public execution. We'll broadcast it live, stream it to every platform, make him confess to war crimes he didn't commit. Unless you come, unless you trade yourself for him, the ghost who refused to die for the general who helped her live, it has a certain poetry, doesn't it? In the cell, Hawk struggled against his restraints. Don't, he started, but Kozlov backhanded him casually, almost gently. The sound was sharp in the small space. The general spat blood onto the concrete. She won't come, Hawk said, working his jaw to make sure it wasn't broken. She's too smart, too well trained. You made sure of that yourself. Perhaps, but I don't think so. You see, I know something else about our dear Scarlett. Something she probably doesn't know I know. Kozlov paused for effect, taking a long drag on his cigarette. Rebecca Hawk, 13 years old, 8th grade at Potomac Middle School in Maryland. Straight A student, soccer team captain, wants to be an engineer like her late mother, except she's not in Maryland anymore, is she? She flew to Detroit 3 days ago, used her college savings to buy a ticket, tried to hire local mercenaries to rescue her father. Brave girl, stupid but brave. Just like someone else we know. Hawk's face went white beneath the bruises. If you've touched her, she's comfortable for now. Guest of Viktor Dragunov himself. 3 meals a day, clean clothes. Even has her school books so she doesn't fall behind. But her continued comfort depends entirely on Scarlett's decision. You have 6 hours, Scarlett. Come alone. Come armed if you like. It won't matter. Trade yourself for them or watch them die on live stream. Your choice. The transmission ended with a click. Scarlett stood in her cabin, mind racing through options. It was a trap, obviously. Kozlov knew she'd come. He'd probably already positioned counter-snipers in places she'd typically set up. He knew her, training her tactics, her instincts. Everything she might do, he'd already anticipated. But Rebecca changed everything. 13 years old. Scarlett had met the girl once, briefly at a military function in 2018 before everything went wrong. Bright kid. Had her father's strategic mind and her late mother's fierce independence. Her mother, Captain Sarah Hawk, had died in Iraq when Rebecca was 3. IED on a convoy route that was supposed to be clear. Now the girl might lose her father too, unless Scarlett acted. She pulled out her go bag from under the floorboards. The cabin was a cover, but it was also a cache. Ammunition sorted by type and grain. Medical supplies vacuum sealed against moisture. Night vision goggles, thermal scope rangefinder. Everything a ghost might need. The gold rifle went into its waterproof case. She ran her fingers along its surface one more time. The plating was ostentatious and practical, but it had saved her life more times than she could count. The weight was perfect. The trigger pull exactly 3.5 pounds. She knew every scratch, every imperfection. She loaded her truck. Ford F-150, purposefully common, purposefully forgettable. Stolen plates she'd swap at a rest stop. Full tank plus jerry cans in the bed. The drive from Montana to Detroit would take 18 hours if she pushed hard. She had 6 hours until the execution. The math was impossible, unless she flew. There was a private airfield 40 minutes away, Small planes, no security cache operations. She'd scouted it months ago as a potential emergency exit. Now it would be her entry. She made the drive in 30 minutes, roads empty in the pre-dawn darkness. The airfield was just a strip of asphalt and a few hangars. She found what she needed, a Cessna 182 old, but maintained fueled and ready. The owner lived in a trailer beside the hangar. She left $20,000 in cash on his doorstep with a note, "Borrowing your plane. We'll return it or buy you a better one." She learned to fly in the Army, part of a cross-training program. Not officially rated, but competent enough for this. The engine started rough in the cold but smoothed out. She taxied without lights, lifted off into the darkness. The flight to Detroit took 4 hours. She landed at a small municipal airport outside the city as dawn was breaking. No tower, no security, just cracked asphalt and weeds growing through concrete. Perfect. She could see the smoke from downtown. Whatever was happening in Dragunov's territory, it was big. The revolutionaries had held this part of Detroit for 3 months, ever since the government had pulled back to reassess the situation. Translation, they'd abandoned it, written off the whole district as unsalvageable. Now Hawk was trapped in that abandonment, and Rebecca too. Scarlett unloaded her gear into a stolen Honda Civic, something that would blend in with the ruins. The temperature was 15 below wind chill, pushing it to -30. She'd grown up in Minnesota, trained in Alaska, operated in Siberia. The cold was manageable. What worried her was the ice. The Detroit River ran along the eastern edge of Dragunov's territory. In summer, it flowed fast and dark, carrying freight ships to the Great Lakes. Now it was frozen on top, but she could hear the current moving underneath. The ice would be inconsistent. Thick in some places, thin in others. One wrong step would mean death in minutes. She drove as close as she dared, then continued on foot. The streets were empty except for burned cars and scattered debris. Every building showed scars. Bullet holes, explosion damage, fire blackening. This wasn't a city anymore. It was a corpse. Through binoculars, she studied Dragunov's perimeter. Guard towers every 100 meters, constructed from shipping containers and steel plates. Searchlights sweeping predictable patterns. Patrols moving in groups of 3 Russian weapons. Chinese equipment, a mix of military surplus and black market gear. They were disciplined, she'd give them that. Trained. But they were watching for helicopters and vehicles, not a single person coming from the water. The Packard automotive plant loomed in the distance. 40 buildings that once employed thousands, now home to 47 revolutionaries who thought they were freedom fighters but were really just Dragunov's puppets. She'd studied the intelligence. Dragunov was a small-time arms dealer who'd seized an opportunity. The chaos in Detroit had given him delusions of grandeur, dreams of revolution. But Kozlov was the real threat. He wasn't here for revolution. He was here for her. She looked at her watch. 5:30 a.m. 30 minutes until the execution. No time for careful reconnaissance. No time for elegant solutions. She'd have to be direct. The river ice was her only option. 800 meters of frozen water between her and the target. She'd have to swim beneath it, find exit points, hope the cold didn't kill her first. She stripped down to her base layer, pulled on the dry suit she'd brought. Military grade, rated for Arctic operations. It would keep her from freezing immediately, but hypothermia was still a countdown clock. 20 minutes maximum in that water. Maybe less. The gold rifle would have to stay in its case during the swim. She waterproofed it again, sealed every possible entry point, attached it to her back with carabiners. The weight would try to drag her down, but she needed the weapon on the other side. She thought about Hawk in that cell. Thought about Rebecca, probably terrified but trying to be brave. Thought about Kozlov, who knew exactly how she operated and would be watching for her signature. Kozlov had made one mistake, though. He trained her, yes, taught her to be predictable in her excellence. But trauma had taught her something else. Sometimes survival meant doing the unexpected. Sometimes winning meant breaking your own rules. At exactly 5:47 a.m., Scarlett slipped into the Detroit River. The water struck her nervous system like an electric shock, even through the dry suit. Her body's first instinct was to gasp, to panic, to flee. She controlled it, forced her breathing to steady, and dove under the ice. Above her, the frozen surface was 6 inches thick in some places, 2 feet in others. The current was stronger than expected, pushing her north. She compensated, swimming at an angle using the rifle case as a rudder. Her fingers were already going numb despite the gloves. Her body's core temperature plummeted dangerously. At 300 meters, she found an air pocket, a place where the ice had buckled, creating a small cave of oxygen. She surfaced just enough to breathe, then went under again. The darkness was absolute. She navigated by instinct, by the pull of current, by faith that she was still heading the right direction. At 500 meters, something brushed against her. She almost screamed, wasting precious air. Then she realized what it was. A body. Someone else who tried this approach and failed. The corpse was frozen in the water, preserved, one hand reaching up, as if trying to claw through the ice. She pushed past it, trying not to think about how easily that could be her. At 700 meters, her body started shutting down. Muscles cramping, vision, tunneling, thoughts becoming sluggish. The voice in her head that had kept her alive through 13 deployments was getting quieter. But she could see light ahead. Fire barrels on the shore where guards stayed warm. She kicked harder, using the last reserves of strength she didn't know she had. Her hand found concrete, a pier old and crumbling, but solid. She pulled herself up inch by inch until she was out of the water and lying on frozen concrete, gasping. No time to rest. Guards would patrol here soon. She forced herself to stand, forced her frozen fingers to work open the rifle case. Water had gotten in despite her precautions. Not much, but enough to freeze in the mechanism. She'd have to clear it, hope it didn't jam when she needed it most. The gold gleamed in the pre-dawn darkness as she assembled it by feel. Barrel receiver, stock scope. Magazine loaded with match-grade ammunition, each bullet hand-selected for consistency. She could hear voices in the distance. Kozlov on a megaphone addressing a crowd. The execution had begun. She was out of time, but she was exactly where she needed to be. The first light of Christmas Eve painted Detroit in shades of gray and gold. From her position behind the crumbling pier, Scarlett watched the city wake to its own decay. Smoke rose from barrel fires where Dragonov's men tried to stay warm. The execution platform stood in the plaza like a gallows waiting. She had minutes, not hours. 5:45 a.m., 15 minutes until showtime. Through her scope, she tracked movement in the main building. The Packard plant's assembly hall, 8 stories of broken windows and exposed steel, served as Dragonov's headquarters. She counted heat signatures through the walls. 47 rebels, just as intelligence had indicated. But their positions were wrong. They weren't spread out for defense. They were concentrated, gathered for the spectacle. Kozlov's voice echoed across the frozen plaza, carried by speakers they'd rigged to the buildings. "Bring the general and the girl." Scarlett's finger tensed on the trigger guard. The girl, Rebecca. So she was here just as Kozlov had threatened. This complicated everything exponentially. 2 extraction targets instead of 1. Double the complexity, half the chance of success, and Kozlov knew it. She swept her scope across the compound, memorizing every detail with the intensity of someone who might only get one chance. The rebels were setting up cameras on tripods, adjusting lights powered by a generator that coughed diesel smoke into the frozen air. Professional equipment, not amateur. They wanted the world to watch. A public execution on Christmas morning streamed live to every platform. Terror as theater, Kozlov's specialty. Movement in the main building caught her attention. Through a third-floor window, she saw them dragging Hawk from his cell. He could barely walk. 2 guards supported his weight, half carrying him toward the stairs. His face was a map of bruises, purple and yellow and black, but his eyes were still alert, still fighting. Still the soldier who'd signed her death certificate with one hand while saving her life with the other. Then she saw Rebecca. The 13-year-old was being held in a separate room 2 floors up. Through the thermal scope, Scarlett could see her heat signature pacing back and forth, 6 steps one way, 6 steps back. The girl wasn't restrained, which meant they were confident she couldn't escape, or they wanted her to try. Either way, she was bait, and everyone knew it. Kozlov's voice came through the speakers again, but also through her earpiece. He was broadcasting on military frequencies, knowing she'd be listening. "Scarlett, I know you're watching. You're probably in an elevated position somewhere between 400 and 800 meters from the plaza. The church bell tower would be my first guess, but you might surprise me. You were always clever, always unpredictable when cornered." He was trying to flush her out, make her second-guess her position, force her to move and reveal herself. But Scarlett didn't take the bait. She remained perfectly still, controlling even her breathing. Let him guess. Let him wonder. "You're thinking about the girl." Kozlov continued, his voice taking on a teaching tone, like he was back in Moscow explaining ballistics. "How to extract both targets, how to divide their forces, how to create enough chaos to mask your approach. But here's what you don't know, my dear student. Here's the variable you haven't calculated." A pause for effect. Kozlov always did like his dramatic moments. "General Bradford Steele is already en route with a Delta Force unit. They'll be here within the hour. Officially, they're coming to rescue General Hawk. Unofficially, they're coming to clean up loose ends. That includes you. That includes the girl. That includes anyone who knows about Operation Phantom." Scarlett's blood ran colder than the river water still freezing on her suit. Steele, the man who'd sold her out 5 years ago. Of course, he'd use this as an opportunity to tie up his last loose thread. If Scarlett died here, killed by rebels or caught in crossfire, no one would ask questions. Just another casualty in a messy situation. And if Rebecca died too, even better for him. No witnesses to what her father knew. "But that's not why you're really here, is it, General?" Kozlov's voice shifted, and Scarlett realized he was now speaking directly to Hawk, probably standing in front of him. "Operation Phantom, 12 ghosts serving America from the shadows. You built it after Afghanistan when you realized the traditional military was failing. 12 dead soldiers who refused to stop fighting." Through her scope, Scarlett saw Hawk lifted onto the execution platform. They forced him to his knees, hands zip-tied behind his back. Someone hung a sign around his neck, "Traitor to the people." The cameras were rolling now, red lights blinking in the dawn gloom. "Each ghost personally selected by you," Kozlov continued, "each with unique skills. The hacker who died in Syria but still breaks into enemy networks. The pilot who crashed in Somalia but still flies black operations. The medic who was killed in Yemen but still saves lives in places America can't officially go. And of course, the sniper who died in Belgrade but still takes impossible shots." Scarlett checked her ammunition. 20 rounds in the magazine, 2 spare mags in her vest, 60 rounds total against 47 targets, plus however many Delta operators Steele was bringing. The math was impossible, but then again, she'd always specialized in impossible. At 5:50, Viktor Dragunov himself appeared on the platform. He was thin, hollow-cheeked with a zealot's gleam in his eyes. Former philosophy professor turned arms dealer turned revolutionary. He wore a military jacket that didn't quite fit playing the role of commander. Behind him, 6 guards formed a semicircle, AK-47s at the ready. "People of the world." Dragunov began reading from a prepared statement. His English was accented but clear. "Today you witness justice. This man, General Nathaniel Hawk, represents the corruption of the American military-industrial complex. He has spent his career oppressing the innocent, destroying nations, murdering children in the name of democracy. All lies. Hawk had spent his career trying to minimize casualties, protect civilians, end conflicts before they spiraled. Scarlett had read his file, seen his record. Lowest civilian casualty rate of any commander in Iraq. Personally funded schools in Afghanistan. Refused orders that would have led to unnecessary deaths even when it cost him promotions. But truth didn't matter here. This was performance. Scarlett ranged the distance. 812 meters to Draganov. Wind from the northwest at 8 knots gusting to 12. Temperature 15 below which would affect bullet trajectory. The cold made air denser would cause the bullet to strike high. Humidity high from the snow which would cause additional drag. She did the calculations automatically adjusting her scope. But she couldn't just start shooting. The moment she fired, they'd scatter. Take cover. Return fire. And Rebecca was still 5 floors up in the main building. She needed them grouped, distracted. She needed chaos, but controlled chaos. That's when she noticed the pattern. The rebels were rotating their patrols every 30 minutes, but there was a gap. When the north checkpoint changed shifts for about 90 seconds, the approach from the river was uncovered. It would happen again at 6 a.m. exactly, right when the execution was scheduled to begin. But more importantly, she noticed something else. The generator powering the lights and cameras had a secondary fuel tank. A red jerry can sitting next to it, probably for refueling without shutting down. One shot to that can would create a fireball knockout power and cause exactly the kind of chaos she needed. She had an idea. Insane. Probably suicidal. But it might work. Scarlett pulled out her last 3 blocks of C4. She'd been saving them for emergency demolition, but this qualified. She set the timers for 6 a.m., staggering them by seconds. The first would hit the support beam of a guard tower she could see from here. The second would hit a weapons cache she'd identified through thermal imaging. The third she'd save for opportunity. She belly crawled from her position, staying below the snow berms that lined the riverfront. Every movement was agony. Her body was still fighting hypothermia muscles, cramping fingers, barely responding. But she'd operated in worse conditions. Hindu Kush Mountains, -40, altitude sickness, and Taliban hunters. She'd survived that. She'd survived this. The first charge went on the guard tower's support, the metal beam already stressed from poor welding. The second went on what looked like an ammunition storage container rust holes, letting her see crates inside. She saved the third, tucking it into her vest. 5:58, 2 minutes. She made it back to her position, settled behind the rifle. Through the scope, she could see everything playing out. Draganov was still speechifying, gesturing dramatically. Hawk remained on his knees, still as stone. And in the building, Rebecca had stopped pacing. She was at the window now, looking down at her father. Then Scarlett saw something that changed everything. Kozlov wasn't with Draganov on the platform. He was on the roof of the main building, and he had his own rifle. A Dragunov Russian-made, powerful enough to reach out past 1,000 meters. And he was scanning the riverfront looking for her. He knew. Somehow he knew her approximate position. 5:59. That's when more figures appeared on the roof with Kozlov. 3 of them, all with rifles. All scanning different sectors. Not rebels. These moved like professionals, like special forces. Former Spetsnaz, probably. Kozlov's own insurance policy. The odds had just gotten worse. 4 counter-snipers, all trained, all watching for her. The moment she fired, they'd triangulate her position. She might get 2 shots, maybe 3 if she was lucky, before return fire found her. 6 a.m. The explosions came simultaneously. The guard tower support beam shattered, sending the entire structure tilting sideways before it crashed down in a spray of concrete and steel. The ammunition container erupted like a string of firecrackers, bullets cooking off in the heat, creating a light show that would be visible for miles. Chaos. Beautiful chaos. Rebels scattered, some running toward the explosions, others diving for cover. Dragonov stopped mid-sentence, looking around wildly. The cameras swung to capture the destruction. Scarlett took her first shot, 812 meters. Wind compensation, temperature adjustment. The golden rifle spoke with a sound like thunder. The fuel can next to the generator exploded in a ball of orange flame, knocking out power to the entire plaza. Lights died. Cameras went dark. The dawn returned to gray. She was already moving before the echo faded. Rolling left, finding a new position behind a concrete barrier. Return fire came exactly where she'd been, heavy rounds chewing through the space she'd occupied 2 seconds ago. Kozlov's team was good, very good, but in the darkness and confusion, she had advantages. She could see through her thermal scope while they were adjusting to the sudden loss of light. She could move while they were fixed in position, and most importantly, she knew something they didn't. She fired the second shot not at a person, but at a structural point, a beam supporting a walkway between buildings. The bullet severed a crucial weld, and the entire walkway began to sag, then collapse. Two rebels who'd been using it for overwatch fell 30 feet onto concrete. Third shot, the lock mechanism on the main building's emergency exit. The door swung open, creating a breach in their security. If Rebecca was smart, if she was her father's daughter, she'd see the opportunity. But Kozlov had found her. His first shot missed by inches, concrete chips spraying across her face. She rolled again, came up firing. Not at him, but at one of his team. The man was silhouetted against the dawn sky, fatal mistake. Her bullet took him center mass. He tumbled backward, disappeared over the roof's edge. "There!" someone screamed. The riverfront north side. Rebels were converging on her position. She could hear boots on frozen ground shouted orders in multiple languages. Time to move. She grabbed the gold rifle and ran, staying low, using debris for cover. Behind her, automatic weapons opened up tracers, lighting the dawn like deadly fireworks. She dove behind an overturned truck as bullets sparked off metal. Through a gap in the wreckage, she could see the plaza. In the chaos, Hawk had somehow gotten to his feet. His hands were still bound, but he was moving, shoulder-checking a guard who got too close. The man went down and Hawk kicked his weapon away. But there were too many. Another guard hit Hawk with a rifle butt, dropping him back to his knees. Blood ran from a fresh cut on his scalp. Scarlett needed to create more chaos. She pulled the third C4 charge, armed it, and threw it as far as she could toward a cluster of vehicles. The explosion flipped two cars, sent rebels diving for cover again. That's when she saw Rebecca. The girl had made it out of the building. She was running across the plaza, heading for her father. Brave, stupid. Brave and stupid, the worst combination in a firefight. A rebel saw her, raise his rifle. Scarlett's shot took him before he could fire. 850 meters through smoke and chaos, but the golden rifle didn't miss. The man spun and fell, but the shot revealed her position again. Kozlov's next round came so close, she felt the heat of its passage. She was pinned. Couldn't move without exposing herself to his fire. Couldn't stay without being flanked by advancing rebels. "Scarlett!" Kozlov's voice boomed through the chaos. He'd found another megaphone. "Impressive as always, but you're outnumbered, outgunned, and out of time. Steele's forces are 10 minutes out. Surrender now, and I guarantee safe passage for the girl." Lies. Kozlov didn't make deals he intended to keep. She needed a new position, higher ground, better angles. The church bell tower was 4 blocks away, but it was the obvious choice. Too obvious. Kozlov would have someone watching it. Unless... She pulled a flare from her vest, lit it, and threw it toward the church. The red star burst, drew immediate attention. Rebels started firing at the tower, assuming she was making for it. In the confusion, she moved the opposite direction toward the ruins of an old factory. The factory was a skeleton of steel and broken glass, but it had elevation. She climbed using rusted beams as handholds, ignoring the way the metal cut through her gloves. 3rd floor, 4th, 5th. From here, she could see everything. The plaza where Hawk and Rebecca were now together, the girl trying to untie her father's hands. The approaching rebels, maybe 20 of them closing in. Kozlov on the roof still searching for her. And in the distance, helicopters. Blackhawks. Delta Force. Steele was early. Of course he was. Kozlov had lied about the timeline, another manipulation in his game of chess. She had minutes to change the outcome. Minutes to save 2 lives from a 3-way crossfire. Through her scope, she found Draganov. He was rallying his men, pointing toward Hawk and Rebecca, shouting orders. One shot would take him out, throw the rebels into disarray. But as she lined up the shot, she saw something that changed everything again. One of the approaching helicopters fired a rocket, not at the rebels, not at the plaza, at the building where she'd been. The entire riverfront erupted in flame and debris. Steele wasn't distinguishing between friend and foe. He was eliminating everyone. All units, this is General Steele. A voice crackled over military frequencies. Weapons free, no survivors. Repeat, no survivors. Clean sweep authorization granted. Delta Force fast rope from the helicopters, black figures descending like spiders. They hit the ground running weapons up, firing at everything that moved. Rebels started falling, but so did civilians who'd been hiding in the buildings. Steele's men weren't checking targets. They were executing everyone. Scarlett watched in horror as the elite soldiers she'd once served alongside became death squads. This wasn't rescue. This wasn't even war. This was murder dressed in tactical gear. She shifted her aim, found a Delta Force operator setting up an M240 machine gun that would have clear lines to the plaza. To Hawk and Rebecca, her bullet took him in the shoulder, spinning him around. Non-lethal, but it would keep him out of the fight. The shot drew attention. Both rebels and Delta Force started firing at her position. The factory shook as heavy weapons found their mark. Glass shattered. Steel beams rang like bells. But in the chaos, she saw opportunity. Kozlov had moved. He was descending from the roof, probably repositioning to deal with the Delta Force threat. For a moment, just a moment, his attention was elsewhere. Scarlett took the shot she'd been waiting for. Not at Kozlov, not at Steele. At the chains holding a massive steel beam in place above the plaza. The beam was part of an old crane system, tons of metal suspended by corroded links. Her bullet severed the critical chain. The beam fell like God's own hammer. It crashed into the plaza, creating a barrier between Hawk and Rebecca and their attackers. Dust and debris clouded the air. In the confusion, she saw them running the general, pushing his daughter toward the river, toward her original entry point. She understood. Hawk had figured out how she'd gotten in. He was heading for the water, hoping the cold that had nearly killed her might save them. But they'd never make it. Too many guns. Too many angles. Unless Scarlett started shooting, not carefully aimed shots, but rapid fire, laying down suppression. The golden rifle barked again and again, brass casings ringing as they hit the floor. She wasn't trying to kill anyone specifically. She was creating a corridor of fear, a path where no one wanted to put their head up. 17 rounds, 18, 19, 20. Magazine empty. She slapped in a fresh mag, but before she could resume firing, the floor beneath her exploded. Someone had hit the building with a rocket. The entire structure groaned, tilted. She was falling, sliding down tilted steel as the factory collapsed. She hit hard concrete, knocking the wind from her lungs. The rifle flew from her hands, skittering across rubble. For a moment, she couldn't move, couldn't breathe, could only lie there as dust settled around her. Boots approached. Multiple sets. She forced her eyes open, saw Delta Force operators surrounding her, weapons aimed at her head. "Target acquired," one said into his radio. "The sniper is down." "Bring her," Steele's voice responded. "I want to handle this personally." They zip-tied her hands, hauled her to her feet. Every part of her body screamed in protest. Through the settling dust, she could see the plaza. Bodies everywhere. Rebels. Maybe civilians. The snow was turning red. But she couldn't see Hawk or Rebecca. They dragged her toward the command building where Steele had set up his position. She counted the operators around her. 6. All focused on her. All assuming the fight was over. They didn't know about the knife in her boot. The one Kozlov had taught her to hide back in Moscow when he'd said, "A sniper's last weapon isn't a rifle. It's the will to survive." As they passed a burned-out vehicle, she made her move. Dropped her weight, rolled backward, came up with the knife somehow in her bound hands. The blade found a gap in tactical armor, and one operator went down clutching his thigh. She spun, slashed the zip ties on a piece of exposed metal, grabbed the fallen operator's rifle. The others were already reacting weapons, swinging toward her, but she was moving, diving, rolling, coming up, firing. 2 more operators down. Non-lethal shots, but they'd need medical attention. The others took cover, calling for backup. She ran, weaving between debris, trying to get back to the golden rifle. She needed it, not just as a weapon, but as evidence. The recording chip in the stock contained everything. Every mission. Every betrayal. She found it half buried in rubble. The gold plating was scratched, the scope cracked, but it was intact. She slung it over her shoulder and kept moving. "Scarlet!" She spun, rifle rising, to find Kozlov standing 20 feet away. He had his Dragunov, but it wasn't aimed at her. Blood soaked his left side. One of Steele's men had tagged him. "Interesting morning," he said in Russian. "Not quite what any of us planned." "Where are they?" she demanded. "Hawk and Rebecca." "Safe. For now. They made it to the water. Your suppressing fire worked. But Steele's men are pursuing. They won't last long in that cold." "Why aren't you shooting me?" Kozlov smiled, blood on his teeth. "Because we have the same enemy now. Steele tried to kill me too. Apparently I'm another loose end." He gestured toward the command building. "He's in there. 3rd floor. 5 men with him. Planning to call in an airstrike, level this entire district. No evidence. No witnesses. Why should I trust you?" "You shouldn't. But you need me. And I need you. Together we might survive this. Apart, we're both dead by noon." Before Scarlet could respond, gunfire erupted nearby. Delta Force had found them. Kozlov and Scarlet dove in opposite directions, found cover, returned fire. Strange alliance, but war made strange bedfellows. "The building has a basement," Kozlov called out between bursts. "Old automotive testing facility, reinforced concrete. It connects to the river through drainage tunnels. Get there. Find Hawk. I'll buy you time." "You'll die." "Probably, but I'm dying anyway." He touched his side, showed her his hand covered in blood. "Liver shot. Maybe an hour left. Might as well make it count." He stood firing his Dragunov at advancing Delta operators, drawing their attention. "Go now!" Scarlet ran. Behind her, she could hear the firefight intensifying. Kozlov's rifle, the chatter of M4s, explosions, then gradually silence. She found the basement entrance, a steel door hanging off its hinges. Inside, darkness and the sound of dripping water. She pulled out her tactical light, swept the space. Massive concrete pillars, rusted machinery. And there in the far corner, 2 figures. Hawk and Rebecca, soaked, shivering, but alive. "Scarlet!" Hawk's voice was weak. "How?" "No time. Steele's calling in an airstrike. We have minutes to get out." She cut Hawk's bonds, helped him stand. Rebecca was hypothermic, barely conscious. They needed medical attention soon, or they'd die anyway. "The tunnels," Hawk said, pointing to a grate in the floor. "Storm drains. They lead to the treatment plant half a mile away." They pulled the grate open. The tunnel below was pitch black, partially flooded, but it was their only option. Scarlet went first, catching Rebecca as Hawk lowered her down. Then Hawk himself, groaning as his injuries protested. They moved through knee-deep water, following the tunnel as it wound beneath the city. Behind them, they could hear explosions. The airstrike had begun. The entire district was being erased, but ahead there was light, an exit, safety. They emerged in the treatment plant as helicopters roared overhead, raining death on the place they'd just escaped. In the distance, the Packard plant collapsed, decades of history reduced to rubble in seconds. "We need to move," Scarlett said. "Steele will verify the bodies. When he doesn't find us, he'll hunt us," Hawk finished. "I know, but first we expose him. The rifle, the recording chip." Scarlett nodded, pulled the golden rifle from her shoulder. In its stock was 5 years of evidence, 5 years of truth waiting to be revealed. But as she looked at it, she realized something. The scope wasn't just cracked. There was a bullet hole through it. Kozlov's shot, or maybe one of the Delta Force operators. The bullet had continued through into the stock, directly into where the chip was housed. She broke open the compartment. The chip was destroyed, shattered into a dozen pieces. The evidence was gone. All of it. The evidence was gone. 5 years of recorded missions, 5 years of proof destroyed by a single bullet through the recording chip. Scarlett stared at the shattered pieces in her palm, each fragment representing a truth that would never be told. The golden rifle, her most trusted companion, had been fatally wounded in its most vital organ. "We need another way," Hawk said, his voice steady, despite the gravity of their situation. He was holding Rebecca against him, the 13-year-old girl shaking from hypothermia, her lips blue, her breathing shallow. "But first, we need to get her warm, or she'll die." They were in the water treatment plant's maintenance room, surrounded by the hum of machinery that hadn't been serviced in years. Outside, they could hear the continuing airstrike. Steele was being thorough. Every building in a 6-block radius was being leveled. No witnesses, no evidence, no questions. Scarlett found emergency blankets in a supply closet, the metallic fabric crinkling as she wrapped them around Rebecca. The girl's eyes fluttered open, focused on her father's face. "Dad, I'm here, sweetheart. You're safe." The soldiers, they were shooting everyone. "I know, but we're out now. We're going to be okay." It was a lie and everyone knew it. They weren't okay. They were 3 people with targets on their backs, hunted by a man with the full resources of the United States military at his disposal. Steele wouldn't stop until they were dead, unless they stopped him first. "Kozlov," Scarlett said suddenly, "he knew something. Before he died, he said Steele was cleaning up loose ends. That means there are others who know about his treason. We need to find them." "Kozlov's dead," Hawk asked. "Liver shot. He bought us time to escape." She didn't mention the strange moment of understanding between them at the end. The teacher and student united against a common enemy. But he wasn't working alone. He had a team, former Spetsnaz. If any survived. The door burst open. Scarlett spun, bringing the damaged rifle up. But it wasn't Delta Force. It was a woman mid-40s wearing civilian clothes but moving like an operator. She had her hands up, showing she was unarmed. "Don't shoot," she said. "I'm here to help." "Who are you?" Scarlett kept the rifle trained on her. "Agent Maria Santos, CIA. The real CIA, not whatever Steele's running." She slowly reached into her jacket, pulled out credentials. "I've been investigating Steele for 2 years. Kozlov was my asset." Kozlov was CIA. Hawk struggled to process this. "Turned him 6 months ago. He was feeding us information about Steele's dealings with the Russians. We were building a case, but Steele moved first. This whole operation, Draganov's revolution, it was all Steele's design. Create a crisis, eliminate everyone who knew about his treason, come out looking like a hero who tried to save the day." "So you have evidence?" Scarlett asked. Santos shook her head. "Kozlov was going to deliver it today. Financial records, communications, proof of Steele's betrayals going back a decade. But it was in the Packard plant. It's gone now, buried under tons of rubble." They were back to square one. No evidence. No proof, just their word against a decorated general's. There's another way, Rebecca said quietly. Everyone turned to look at her. She was still shivering, but her eyes were clear-focused. The cameras. The rebels were broadcasting. It was going out live. Someone must have recorded it. Santos pulled out a tablet, started searching. She's right. The feed was picked up by dozens of sources, news channels, social media, independent journalists. Here. She turned the screen toward them. The video showed the Plaza Dragonov speaking Hawk on his knees. Then the explosions, the chaos, the Delta Force helicopters arriving. And clearly audible over the speakers, Steele's voice ordering no survivors. It's not enough, Hawk said. He'll claim it was necessary. Fog of war. Tragic, but unavoidable. But combined with testimony from survivors, Santos trailed off, looking at them meaningfully. We're the only survivors, Scarlett said. Steele made sure of that. Not quite. Santos pulled up another video. This was uploaded 10 minutes ago. The screen showed a man Scarlett recognized as one of Kozlov's Spetsnaz team. He was wounded speaking in accented English to someone off camera. My name is Captain Dmitry Volkov, former Russian Special Forces. I was hired by Alexei Kozlov to provide security for an operation in Detroit. What I witnessed today was not military action. It was massacre. American General Bradford Steele ordered his men to kill everyone. Civilians, surrendering combatants, even his own wounded. I have names, dates, operations where General Steele sold information to highest bidder. I am prepared to testify to International Criminal Court. Where is he? Scarlett asked. Canadian consulate requesting asylum. He made it out during the chaos. Santos looked at them. If we can get you somewhere safe, get your testimony on record combined with his and the video evidence. The tablet exploded in her hands. Sniper shot through the window. Santos went down, blood spreading across her chest. Move! Scarlett shoved Hawk and Rebecca behind a concrete pillar as more shots punched through the walls. Steele's men had found them. Through the shattered window, she could see them. Delta Force operators advancing in tactical formation. At least a dozen, probably more. They had the building surrounded. This is General Steele, a voice boomed through a megaphone. You are surrounded. Surrender now, and I guarantee you'll receive fair treatment. More lies. Scarlett knew what Steele's guarantee was worth. She checked her ammunition. One damaged rifle with 8 rounds left. Santos had a Glock 19 in her shoulder holster, 15 rounds, against a full Delta Force squad. The math was impossible. Again. But then she heard something else. Helicopters. Not military Black Hawks, but civilian aircraft. News helicopters drawn by the airstrike circling the destruction like vultures over a carcass. General Hawk, a reporter's voice amplified. Can you confirm reports of a military massacre in Detroit? The media, they were live. Cameras rolling. Steele couldn't kill them now, not with witnesses. Or could he? This is a military operation. Steele's voice responded. All civilian aircraft clear the area immediately, or you will be fired upon. They're not leaving, Rebecca whispered, watching through a crack in the wall. The helicopters, they're staying. 4 news helicopters hovering just outside the danger zone, cameras trained on the treatment plant. The whole world was watching now, but Steele had gone too far to stop. He'd find a way to spin it. Dead terrorists, justified shooting, national security, unless they gave the world something else to see. Sir, Scarlett said to Hawk, can you move? Do I have a choice? We need to get outside, in view of the cameras. If Steele shoots us on live television. He's finished, Hawk completed, but he might do it anyway. Then we make sure he pays for it. Scarlett checked Santos. Dead. No help there. But the agent's tablet, though damaged, was still recording, still uploading to the cloud. Everything that happened here would be preserved. Rebecca, stay behind your father. No matter what happens, stay behind him. The girl nodded, brave despite everything. Her mother's daughter, her father's strength. They moved toward the door. Outside, Delta Force was taking positions. Scarlet could see the laser sights dancing in the morning air, painting red dots on the walls. The moment they stepped outside, they'd be in the kill zone. But the cameras were watching. The world was watching. "Steele!" Hawk called out. "Bradford Steele! I know you can hear me. You want me dead because I know what you are. A traitor who sold out his country for money, who betrayed his soldiers for profit. General Hawk has clearly suffered psychological trauma." Steele's voice responded, pitched for the cameras now. "We're here to help him. Lower your weapons and surrender." "I have names," Hawk continued. "Operations you compromised. Belgrade 2019, Mosul 2020, Kandahar 2021. How many Americans died because of you, Bradford?" Silence. Then movement. Steele himself was coming forward, walking into the open. He knew the cameras were on him. He needed to control the narrative. "Nathan," he said, dropping the formality, playing the concerned colleague. "You're confused, injured. That woman with you, she's Scarlet Thorne, a rogue operative who killed her entire team. She's manipulating you. Is that why you tried to have her killed 5 years ago?" Hawk stepped into view, hands raised, Rebecca behind him. "Is that why you sold her position to the Russians?" The news helicopters moved closer. Scarlet could hear the reporters chattering excitedly. This was the story of the year. Two generals accusing each other of treason on live television. "I'm trying to save your life," Steele said. He'd drawn his sidearm but kept it lowered. "That woman is dangerous. She's already killed 6 of my men today." "Your men who were executing civilians," Scarlet said, stepping out with the golden rifle visible, but not raised. "Let the cameras see it. Let them see the weapon that had become legend. I have video evidence, audio recordings. Your voice ordering no survivors?" It was a bluff. The chip was destroyed. But Steele didn't know that. His face changed. The mask of concern slipped, revealing the cold calculation beneath. "You have nothing. You're a ghost. You don't even exist. Then why are you so afraid of me?" Steele raised his pistol. The Delta Force operators tensed fingers on triggers. One word from their commander, and all 3 of them would be cut down. But the cameras were rolling. The world was watching. And in that moment, Scarlet saw Steele realize he'd lost. Even if he killed them, even if he silenced them, the doubt had been planted. The questions would be asked. The investigation would begin. But he was going to do it anyway. She could see it in his eyes. The decision made. Better to deal with the fallout than let them live. That's when the shot came. Not from Steele, not from Delta Force. From behind them, somewhere in the ruins. The bullet took Steele in the chest center mass, spinning him around. He fell to his knees, looking confused, looking at the hole in his chest plate where the armor-piercing round had punched through. Another shot. One of the Delta operators fell. Then another. Precision shooting. Kill shots. Someone was picking them off one by one. "Sniper, take cover." The Delta Force squad scattered training, overcoming confusion. They returned fire at the ruins, but they were shooting blind. The sniper had elevation cover and clearly knew what they were doing. Scarlet grabbed Hawk and Rebecca pulled them back inside as bullets filled the air. Outside, she could hear orders being shouted, calls for backup, for air support. But also something else. Someone approaching. Through the doorway, she saw him. Alexei Kozlov, bloody but alive, dragging himself forward with the Dragunov rifle. He'd survived. Somehow, impossibly, he'd survived and followed them. "Did you think," he gasped in Russian, looking at Scarlet, "that I would die before finishing our lesson?" He raised the rifle not at her, but at the Delta Force operators regrouping for another assault. His shots were precise despite his injuries. 3 more down. The squad was combat ineffective, pulling back, dragging wounded. Go! Kozlov said, blood frothing on his lips. The drainage tunnel, north exit. There's a van, keys under the bumper, medical supplies inside. Why? Scarlett asked. Why save us? Because Steele killed my brother. Because he betrayed everyone who trusted him. Because sometimes, my dear student, the enemy of your enemy is your friend. He coughed more blood. And because you showed me mercy when you could have killed me. Debt repaid. He turned back to the Delta Force positions, firing steadily, keeping them pinned. Scarlett didn't wait. She got Hawk and Rebecca moving down into the tunnels again, this time heading north. Behind them, Kozlov's rifle spoke its final arguments. Each shot a declaration. Each bullet a punctuation mark on a life spent in violence. When the rifle finally fell silent, they were already gone. The van was exactly where he'd said. Old, unremarkable, the kind that blended into any cityscape. The keys were under the bumper. Inside, as promised, medical supplies, military grade, antibiotic surgical tools, even IV bags. Scarlett drove while Hawk worked on Rebecca in the back. The girl was warming up, color returning to her face. She'd live. They all would, at least for now. Where are we going? Hawk asked. The Canadian consulate. Dmitry Volkov is there. With his testimony and ours with the video evidence, we can expose everything. Steele's dead, but his network isn't. Others were involved. Others profited. This doesn't end with him. They drove through Detroit streets already filling with emergency vehicles, media vans, military police. The massacre was out. The story was breaking. By nightfall, it would be global news. 3 hours later, they sat in a secure room in the Canadian consulate. Dmitry Volkov was there, bandaged but alert. FBI agents, real ones, not Steele's puppets, were taking their statements, recording everything, building the case that would expose a decade of treason. Rebecca was asleep on a couch, wrapped in blankets, finally safe. Hawk was being treated for his injuries, ribs taped, cuts sutured. And Scarlett stood by the window, watching the city, the golden rifle case at her feet. Agent Thorne, one of the FBI agents said. She turned. We'll need the rifle. For evidence. She nodded, knelt, opened the case. The golden rifle lay there, scarred but unbroken. She ran her fingers along its surface one more time, remembering every shot it had taken, every life it had saved and ended. It's just a tool, she said, handing it over. Metal and moving parts. It's more than that, Hawk said from his chair. It's proof that one person can make a difference, that standing up to power is possible even when the odds are impossible. The agent took the rifle, logged it as evidence. It would sit in an evidence locker now, then probably a museum someday. The golden rifle that exposed a conspiracy, the weapon that killed a traitor and saved the innocent. But Scarlett didn't need it anymore. She'd been a ghost for 5 years, defined by that rifle, by the shots she'd taken. Now she had a chance to be something else. Someone else. What will you do now? Hawk asked her. Disappear again. There are others out there like Steele. Other threats, other innocents who need protecting. You could come back, officially. Your death could be reversed. Your record cleared. She shook her head. Some things can't be undone. Some people work better in shadows. She looked at Rebecca, sleeping peacefully for the first time in days. Take care of her. She's strong, but she's seen too much. Will we see you again? No, but you'll know I'm out there. When impossible shots save innocent lives. When tyrants fall to unseen bullets. When justice comes from nowhere. She smiled. Ghosts don't retire. They just fade away. She left through a service entrance while the FBI was processing paperwork. Vanished into the crowd outside, another face among thousands. The golden rifle was gone, but she didn't need it. She'd find another weapon. She always did. 6 months later, the conspiracy was fully exposed. 17 military officers arrested. 3 senators resigned. a complete overhaul of special operations oversight. Steele was buried without honors, his name struck from every commendation. Dmitry Volkov testified before Congress was granted asylum, disappeared into witness protection. His testimony led to the discovery of financial records Kozlov had hidden in safety deposit boxes across the country. The full extent of Steele's treason shocked even cynical intelligence veterans. General Nathaniel Hawke was promoted, put in charge of reforming Special Operations Command. His first act was to create new protocols preventing another Steele. His second was to officially close Operation Phantom, letting 12 ghosts finally rest in peace. Or so the paperwork said. Rebecca Hawke returned to school but was forever changed. She'd seen truth and lies, heroism and betrayal, the best and worst of humanity. She studied harder, trained, more preparing for something she couldn't quite name. West Point accepted her application when she turned 17 one year early. In her dorm room, she kept a photo from that Christmas morning in Detroit. Her father, herself, and a woman whose face was partially obscured, but whose presence was unmistakable. Below it, a single line, "Some heroes don't need names." And somewhere, always, somewhere, reports filtered in. A human trafficker in Bangkok found dead from a sniper's bullet. A terrorist cell leader in Prague eliminated from impossible range. A warlord in Sudan who thought he was untouchable until he wasn't. The authorities called them unrelated incidents. Random violence. But those who understood recognized the pattern. Clean shots, impossible angles. Justice delivered from nowhere. The golden rifle was in an FBI evidence locker, tagged and cataloged. But its spirit lived on in every impossible shot, every saved life, every tyrant who learned that nowhere was safe from judgment. Scarlett Thorne was dead officially and permanently this time. But the ghost she'd become didn't need a name, didn't need recognition, needed only the certainty that somewhere someone was standing watch. Someone was willing to take the shot others couldn't or wouldn't. Someone who understood that in the space between legal and right, between official and necessary, there was work to be done. The world had seen what happened in Detroit, had witnessed the corruption that could fester in shadows, but they'd also seen that someone had stood against it. Someone had fought back. Someone had refused to let evil win. That was the real lesson of the Golden Rifle. Not that violence was the answer, but that standing up to power was possible. That one person with the right skills and the will to use them could change everything. The ghost endured, nameless but not forgotten. The legend grew not of the Golden Rifle, but of the woman who'd wielded it. And in the darkness where evil gathered, there was always the whisper of fear that somewhere a scope was already trained on them. That justice, when it came, would arrive at 2,800 feet per second. The war never ended, but neither did the watch. And that was enough. It had to be. In a cabin in Montana, snow fell on empty rooms. But in the basement behind a false wall, only one person knew about new equipment waited. A new rifle, not gold but black as night. Ammunition sorted by type and distance. Medical supplies for wounds not yet received. And a simple note, for when they call again. And they always call S, because ghosts don't retire. They just wait for the next impossible shot.